YouTube? I know a lot of you were asking when the next video will be up, so I'm very happy to present a special episode. I often ask on my website what type of tutorials people would like to see. So by popular vote, I'm taking you to uncharted lands, to an area in which few dare to walk on, and that is figure modification. Now before I begin, let me explain a little bit on figure modification. There are two types of modifications. The first one is kit bashing. This is when you exchange pieces between two or more kits to make a new one. Take this example where this person took several parts from 4 different kits to make a new character. Which, by the way, his Deviantart profile link is in the description area. His work is awesome if you want to check it out. This is a very tricky way to do a kit bash since you need to consider scales and proportions, so you gotta be careful. The second way to modify a figure is by stripping, cutting, and realigning several of its parts to make a completely different character with a similar pose. This is called a kit conversion. I made my first conversion 2 years ago. I took this kit and made it look like this character and converted into this. Now, I highly recommend that people interested in a kit conversion should totally buy this book. It's called Figure no Tsukurikata, Volume 2, which translated means let's make a figure. This book is a little on the expensive side and it's also in Japanese, but it's actually more full of images and less text. It's very self-explanatory, in other words. I studied this for a while before making my first conversion, so my second conversion was still a challenge, but not as difficult as the first time. It's available right now at yesasia.com, so I'll be placing the link on the description section as well. Alright, now that I've let you dip your toes into the water a little bit, let's get some splashing going. To be able to even start a project, you must do research. Yes, research. Study the character you want to make and look at several different kits that resemble it. This would be by hair, arms, muscular complexion, face, even clothing. So when you identify your kit, the second thing you want to do is check the parts of the original kit and visualize the areas you will modify so you can have a mental guide of the actions you will need to take to convert this kit. Let me start with a more visual example. I used to play an MMO called Cabal Online for God knows how many years. I still play it rarely, but well, you know, that's MMOs, consume most of your time, so I need to do other things other than grinding all day long. Anyways, let me present my character. This is a female blader, which is my favorite class and the only one I've played since I started. So ever since E2046 launched the so-called Sabrina, quote-unquote, which is actually another character class from the same game, I just had this project in my mind, making my own blader. Because truth be told, I really wanted E to make my blader instead of that Force Shielder, but black. Looking at E's kits, I've come to notice that the closest resemblance to my character was actually a character from Lineage 2. So let me present my selected kit. So now that you have a more visual example, let's get the party started. When I initiated my project, I printed out as many references from the character suit as I could possibly get, which is a very big tip I can give you, as well to have a lot of references. Here's the kit I'm going to be using. First, inspecting all pieces. Look at the wonderful detail. It's a shame I won't be painting an elf. Anyways, here is the blade, which will be modified as well. It fits well and a perfect pose for my blader. And look at this beautiful sculpt. Shame it's going to be erased to give way to my design. After inspecting the parts, it's time to start with the heavy stuff. Now, I must warn you, if you're a squeamish Lineage 2 fanboy or girl, please look away, or forever be traumatized. I told you to look away. Please, no haters, okay? Anyways, this is how I cut and erase areas and things that I will not need so that I can give way to my character design. Since this is an elf, my character is human, so I need to take away those pointy ears and make them look normal. And as a safety reminder, please never forget to use a face mask. Cover your nose so you won't inhale any resin dust. It's bad for you and you know that. Anything that's dust and goes into your lungs, you're dead. Although truth be told, I love the smell of resin when I open a brand new box with a kit inside. Okay, since my character has a two-part suit, I've separated the torso to be able to make guide connections and work on it. When removing some of the detail from the elf costume, there were grooves left behind and some areas also needed some leveling. A little shout out to my friend Ogami in France. Because of him, I was able to learn a little trick. You can dilute Aves Epoxy Putty by using 91% isopropyl alcohol to make a paste consistency but thicker than normal putty like Tamiya would be. All I did left was just apply it with some sculpting tools and just even it out. Next was to mark the areas on the sleeves where I wanted to create my design. I have this strange bit with a nail-shaped tip. I don't really know where you could buy this because it came with my first Dremel I had. It was a Chinese knockoff, or model if you want to call it that way, and apparently it had a lot of drill bits for nail art. I never had any use for these tips until now. Now that the putty has hardened, I just took my Dremel and sanded out some lumps left behind so I can sand everything evenly and leave it smooth. After I'm done with the parts I had puttied, this is how they turn out after that. but since they still had little pinholes here and there, I used some Mr. Dissolve putty and then had another sanding session once it's dry. This is something that you will encounter very oftenly when modifying a kit. You will have your sandpaper and your putty aside you every single time for the most part, because sooner or later you will get imperfections here and there. Since my blader has like a 4-piece skirt thingy, I have to make them from scratch because the elf didn't have them. And since I don't want them to have any disproportions between them, I decided to make some patterns to cut and have as a guide. Make sure to measure against the actual figure so you can get an accurate design and a fit as well. I start from bottom to top on modifications, so I decided to initialize on the transformation on the boots. This is the raw design, but let me show you how I actually achieved that. To be able to get a long, thin piece of putty, you need to get yourself a small rolling pin. I got this one at Bleak Arts and it cost less than $7. Place that piece of putty between a sheet of plastic wrap and roll it until the desired thickness. This way the putty won't stick to your rolling pin. Once it's ready, I just go ahead and cut it into the shape I want to cover and place it on the boot. Now you might have noticed that I marked down the area in the leg where I want my boot to show, so I'm just going to follow that pattern. The design in the boot is actually divided, so I'm going to do one side and then the other one when it dries. When applying the putty to the surface, you will leave behind your fingerprints. So smoothing out the putty with your sculpting tool and a little bit of olive oil will help a lot so that you won't have to sand that much, and also so that the putty won't stick to your tools. The sleeves are 50% done. I'll just put them aside so I can work on the other piece. Now that I've reduced the ears, all that's left to be done is just redefine with my Dremel and fine tip. Are more recognizable, but still a little short, so we'll add more putty and make the helix. And those of you with a question mark on your head, if you don't know what a helix is, well, here's a little bit of ear anatomy. This is the ear, and that's the helix. There you go. Every time you advance on modifications, it's best to put your figure back together to see how they're coming up. That way, in case you added putty to areas that connect, you can check if the pieces are still aligned and without gaps. Time to make the 4 pieces that make her skirt. Since she's in a very dynamic pose, I want her parts to flow and not just dangle, like you would imagine something dangling without any pattern. So using this guide, I can see how I could place that part to have a dynamic flow as well. Even though putty is hard, it's fragile when it's too thin. So to prevent any breakage, take a sheet of aluminum paper, fold it in two and glue it. Take your pattern and mark the outline to cut it out. This is kind of like a pin, but for flat and thin surfaces. Take those new patterns and place one on the next putty strip, long enough to cover your new pattern, and just cut the excess putty around it. Once you have the piece ready, be careful where you place it by securing it with masking tape. To make it look like it's floating in the air because she's pouncing off a grave, I've placed some masking tape below it to give it the form I want, and I will do this to each of the pieces of her skirt. In other words, I'm giving movement to that piece. Phase 2 on the sleeves. Now it's time to add all the details. Just like I did with the boots, I've marked where I want them to go. Since the sleeves have a string going in a zigzag mode, my idea is to make just that. So I'm taking these little metal rings, cutting them in half, and making little handle attachments to pass that string through them. When working with new pieces, wait until they're hard to be able to work with the next one in the same place so you won't damage or mess up the original modification you made. All set? Kinda reminds you like your Aunt Bertha's hair curlers, doesn't it? Working on the other side of the sleeves, just as I did with the skirt, one side first and then the other one at a time. To be able to have those new pieces stay in place, you need to make some guide connections. So what I did was carve into the surface and make just that. time to start with the top. Now I don't know about you, but this elf has some pretty big knockers. My blader is half her cup, but that's okay. It's not like guys will see that as something bad, right? Okay, now when making straight lines, it's best to use masking tape to guide you so you can make the necessary mark. Looking good so far. Remember that when making new additions, you need to sand them so that they can be even and smooth. You don't want any lumps or much less fingerprints in case you accidentally touched it while it was still hardening. Grabbing some more rings and cutting them in half to make those handles. First one looks great, now let's see how the rest look. Pretty awesome. All ready to make that string go zigzag. The parts of the skirt will get the same treatment to give it the detail that the original character has. Now it's not perfect and it still has lines and grooves, so I'm going to re-putty it and re-sand. Like I said before, you're going to do this really often so that the surface can be smooth. And since the backside still has that aluminum foil visible, what's next on the list is to cover that up, especially so that the new guide can be secured to the piece, because it can fall with enough pressure if applied, and you don't want that. Once the putty on the back is hard, it's now time to sand the edges and refine it, because some areas are a little raspy. all smooth and ready for detailing. Alright, now all the detailing I've been doing up until now to the parts to make straight lines has been with this nail tip. Again, I'm really not sure where you can buy it because this one came with a kit I used to have. And the same procedure again to make those details, and this will also be applied to the torso. This concludes part 1 of this 3-part special on kit modification. The next video is going to be painting, and lastly, part 3 will be the base. I know I've showed you several base videos before, but this one will rule them all. Lots of the procedures and techniques you saw came in the book that I recommended at the beginning of the video. So if you have the money, I highly recommend you get it. I also need to give a very important tip to the people that actually want to start doing this. And that is, have in mind to make your pieces in a way that you won't have trouble painting them once you're done. A lot of sculptors never take this into consideration. They will just make a single piece, and painting gets very difficult, especially, for example, under the arms or between the legs. So make your project so that the pieces can be removed, painted, and put back just like a GK should be. Thanks for sticking around for the full half hour, and if you took breaks between, I really don't blame you. This was a very extensive topic I had to cut short. This project left me with more than 80 hours of film, so what you just saw is 40 hours compressed into 30 minutes. I have a new mini project I want to announce. At the end of the month, I will start uploading short and quick tutorials on little things that people request. So if you have suggestions or requests, be my guest and leave it on the comment section, or you can also check my official website as well as my Facebook page. I tend to give a lot of updates on many things, especially when it comes to tutorials. So if you want to be informed, just follow me on Facebook. Thanks again, and see you soon! Have fun, my resin monkeys! It's called Fuyu no Tsukuri. Please never forget to use a face mask. Oh yeah, to be able to get a thing, even working with new pieces. Time to start with the top. Now I don't need. Okay, now when masking, to give it detailed, now that putty, I wanna go potty. Once this concludes part 1 of and put back.